Let's take a look at the investigation into the deaths of the Idaho Four. What's our goal here? We want to look at all things with a critical eye. Having high standards, and looking at an investigation critically, is a great way to identify weaknesses, learn, and build them up. If you can't do this, you should probably leave. So, the details of how the following recording was obtained are sketchy AF, and, quite frankly, unbelievable. But I care less about that, and more about what's said in the recording, and how much of that can be corroborated. I've linked the full, hour-long video in the description, but it's way too long to listen to right now. The creator of this recording is a reporter. I used the first few people to validate the details of this recording, and I'll explain how. Then, we'll jump into the part that I found most interesting. Let's start with the backstory. The reporter who created the recording is Sean Cohen with the Daily Mail. The first person Sean speaks to is retired MPD Police Captain Paul Kwiatkowski. This is the article that Sean subsequently published based off of quotes provided by Paul during the recorded interview. Full article link in description. The date of this recording is December 8, 2022. At one point, Sean asks Mr. K if he is going to the parade later. They also speak about the white Hyundai Elantra, which was announced to the world on December 7, 2022. At the parade, Sean speaks to Chief James Fry. During that discussion, he asks Chief Fry about the front door at 1122 King Road being wide open at 9 o'clock in the morning. Chief Fry states that he doesn't know where that came from, and he doesn't know one way or the other about it. The most important part, in my opinion, can be found beginning at minute 46 of the full video. The woman who speaks with Sean is the wife of James Curtis Leonard. Her daughter joins in as well. Before we play this, we will take a look at two probable cause affidavits for the arrest of James Curtis Leonard. One is for what started as a voluntary manslaughter charge in 2007, but was upgraded to murder in the second degree in 2008. The other is for domestic battery with traumatic injury, aggravated assault, attempted strangulation, and felony injury to a child on December 7, 2022, which was the day before this recorded interview. Here is the criminal complaint against James Curtis Leonard for voluntary manslaughter, filed on June 19, 2007. And here is the criminal complaint against James Curtis Leonard for murder in the second degree, filed on April 7, 2008. Let's listen to the officer first read us the probable cause affidavit for his arrest in 2007. I'll warn you ahead of time that the description of the crimes in both 2007 and the one we will read after that, which occurred in 2022, might be hard for some to listen to.
On June 19, 2007, at 0441 hours, I was contacted by Lada County Dispatcher, Mike Gregory. Gregory told me there had been a shooting on Springer Road. I was instructed to meet Sergeant Aston at the sheriff's office. After arriving at the sheriff's office, Sergeant Aston told me and Detective Viet Meir to go to the residence where we were to talk with individuals on scene and ask them if they would voluntarily come into the sheriff's office for interviews. We were met at the scene by Deputy Russell, who told us there were 4 adults and 2 children. The adults were separated, 3 of them in different patrol vehicles and 1 outside of the patrol vehicle sitting in the grass next to the road. Deputy Russell pointed to the man sitting on the grass and said that he thought this man was the one who fired the handgun, but he was not certain. Deputy Russell had no further information and had not been up to the residence. At 0636 hours, I talked with, who agreed to be transported to the sheriff's office for an interview. At 0643 hours, I asked the man who was sitting on the grass next to the road if I could join him. He told me I could. I introduced myself and told him that I worked for the sheriff's office. The male identified himself to me as James Leonard. I asked him if he would mind going to the sheriff's office to be interviewed. Leonard said, "Don't mind at all." I told him he was not under arrest and it was entirely up to him whether he wanted to go to the sheriff's office for an interview. I told Leonard he could ride to the sheriff's office with me if he wanted. Leonard said, "I'm the one who shot him." Leonard said he did not have a choice, because Lee was on top of him. Leonard said he was leaning against the Jeep and Lee hit him on his face. Leonard got up and we walked to my vehicle. Leonard sat in the passenger seat. At 0651 hours, I read Leonard his Miranda warning. Leonard said he understood his rights and signed the form to indicate the same. He agreed to talk with me. Leonard asked me if I felt he should have a lawyer present. I told him that it was up to him. Leonard said, "I don't think so." Leonard was cold, so we sat in my vehicle so he could warm up while others were preparing to be transported to the sheriff's office for interviews. Leonard and I sat quiet for just over a minute when he said, he threatened all of us. I asked Leonard if he wanted to talk about it now and told him it was up to him. Leonard said, now or later it doesn't matter, I'm going to remember more now than later. I told Leonard to tell me if he wanted to. Leonard said he got a phone call at about 0230 hours from Tyler Lee. I asked what Lee did. Leonard said that Lee told him that he needed to talk with him and it was important and it could not wait until morning. Leonard said he knew by the sound of Lee's voice that he could not trust Lee. Leonard said that Lee has come at him in the past with bats, machetes, and other things. Leonard said Lee came to his house. Leonard said he was leaning against the back of a Jeep in the driveway. Leonard said Lee was rambling on about his girlfriend sleeping with me. Leonard said he told Lee he was not sleeping with his girlfriend and told Lee to go home and go to bed. Leonard said Lee would not leave and he told him that he was not going to tell him to leave again. Leonard said that Lee blindsided him and told him he was going to slit your throat. I asked Leonard how he was blindsided. Leonard said Lee hit him on the left eye and I was able to see a faint mark under Leonard's left cheek. Leonard said he fell to the ground and Lee jumped on top of him and told him that he was going to kill everyone as soon as he was done with him. Leonard said Lee threatened his son and that is when he shot Lee. Leonard said he was on his side, and Lee was on top of him, pushing him into the ground. Leonard said he had a handgun in his sweatshirt pocket which he took out and fired. I asked Leonard if he had a weapon. Leonard said that he did not see Lee with a weapon and did not know if Lee had a weapon. Leonard said that Lee generally carries a knife that has two blades that open opposite of one another. On June 19, 2007, Leonard's wife said in her written statement she had gotten home at around 23:30 hours on June 18, 2007. She said when Leonard was not home by about 0130 hours, she decided to call him using and cell phone. Leonard's cell phone records show this received call at 0129 hours. She said Leonard got home at about 0230 hours and got into bed with her. She said as they were falling asleep their cell phone began to ring. They did not pick up the call. Other calls began to come in one after another, so she said she told Leonard to see who kept calling. She said another call came in and they lost reception. Leonard told her it was Lee who had been calling. She said Leonard went to the porch to get reception. She said about 5 to 10 minutes later, Leonard returned and retrieved a .38 caliber revolver from a locked safe which was under their bed. She said Leonard told her Lee was coming out because Lee's girlfriend had told Lee she had sex with Leonard. Leonard's wife said she asked Leonard, well, did you? He replied, no, of course not. She wrote in her statement Leonard left the bedroom and returned with the house phone and told her to call the police if she heard gunshots. She said Leonard went back outside to smoke a cigarette and presumably wait for Lee. She said Lee arrived, so she snuck out to the living room to peek out the windows. She said she watched Lee pull up next to Leonard's Mustang. She said she saw a dome light in the white Chevy pickup with two blue racing strips turn on and then off, and heard the door of the vehicle shut. She said she saw the cherry of a cigarette and could not see anything more, so when she did not hear any shouting she went and sat on the couch. She said she had not been sitting for more than a few minutes when she heard a gun go off. She said she heard one shot, a pause, and two more shots, one after the other. She said she had to go to the bedroom to get the phone. As she ran back through the kitchen to the side porch she said she fell. She said Leonard came back to the house and said, I have a big problem. She replied by saying, you have a very big problem, and handed Leonard the phone. She said she asked Leonard why he fired the gun and Leonard told her Lee had hit him and had come at him with a knife. And are the renters of the house and allowed Leonard and his wife to stay with them. The renter said in her written statement she heard a vehicle drive in at 0230 hours. She said that later she heard another vehicle drive up and went back to sleep. She said she awoke to two loud bang noises. She said she looked out the window and saw Leonard. She said she went downstairs where she sat with Leonard's wife on the bottom of the stairs. She said his wife was crying and asked her what was wrong but she kept crying. She said she asked his wife what the loud sound was and she told her it was gunshots. She said she looked out through the window in the door and asked Leonard's wife who was outside. She replied, Tyler. She told her that Lee's girlfriend told Lee that Leonard had slept with her. She said, and Leonard had come back into the house through the kitchen door and she went upstairs. Said in her written statement that while she were upstairs, she asked him if Lee was dead and he did not answer her. She said she heard a truck start and looked outside. She said she saw the truck backing up and freaked out because Leonard was messing up the crime scene. She said she ran downstairs and told them they needed to call the police. She said when Leonard came in the house she asked him if he moved the truck. She said Leonard told her that he had moved the truck. She said she told Leonard it was going to look like he was trying to cover shit up and mess things up because the truck was backed up to Tyler. She said Leonard went back outside and moved the truck again. She said in her written statement she asked Leonard where Lee was when he shot him. She said Leonard told her Lee was on Leonard's, back with a knife, so he shot 3 times. Said in his written statement that he awoke at about 03:00 hours and was not sure which woke him up, pop sound or the voices. He got up and looked out the window and saw Leonard walking towards the house. He said he got dressed and went downstairs where he saw Leonard's wife at the bottom of the stairs and asked her if she was all right because she was crying, but she didn't answer him. He said Leonard came in the house and said, "No one will threaten my family." He and Leonard went outside and walked to the front of the Jeep where he said he saw the body on the ground. He said he asked Leonard, "What did you do?" He could not remember what Leonard's answer was. He said Leonard told him the gun was on the Mustang, so he looked and saw the gun on the hood of Leonard's Mustang. He said he went back to the house and told that they were going back upstairs to bed because he did not want anything to do with what had just happened. He said in his written statement that while he and were upstairs, she asked him if Leonard shot Lee. He said he told her, yes. She then noticed Leonard was moving the truck and she told him to stop Leonard because he was not supposed to touch anything. He said he went out and told Leonard to stop moving the truck, and asked him to come in the house so they could talk. Leonard moved the vehicle away from the body and went into the house where he was eventually talked into calling the police. About 30 minutes, or more, later, a call was placed to 911. He said at some point, he had told him that he had told Lee not to come out to the house until tomorrow because Lee, needed time to cool down. He said Leonard told him Lee had attacked him with a knife. On July 5, 2007, during an interview in preparation for a polygraph, Idaho State Police Detective Fred Swanson learned from that Leonard tried to dispose of Lee's body. He said while he and Leonard were outside together, Leonard asked him for a shovel, which he provided. He said he refused to help Leonard dispose of Lee's body and went back into the house. At some point, he said he took the shovel and placed it in a nearby shed. On June 21, 2008 at 0800 hours, an autopsy was done on Lee by Dr. Jeffrey M. Reynolds, pathologist. Reynolds determined there were 3 gunshot wounds in Lee. The first and fatal shot was a contact wound to the right side of Lee's chest which penetrated Lee's heart. Death was within seconds. Reynolds determined the second and third shots were post-mortem due to lack of bleeding. There was 1 bullet wound to Lee's left leg in which the bullet entered the inside of the left leg at the thigh and exited the opposite side, and 1 bullet wound to Lee's face in which the bullet traveled from just under the left eye to the top of the back of the head and did not exit. Reynolds could not determine the order of the second and third shots. Collected blood and urine samples from Lee tested and indicated a presence of mescaline and cannabinoids in Lee, but no alcohol. During the autopsy, a closed single-blade folding-style knife was found in Lee's pants pocket. No other weapon was found on Lee or in the immediate vicinity where his body was found. On April 22, 2008, at about 13:30 hours, I contacted, referencing a voicemail she had left for Prosecutor Thompson. She was Lee's sister, and had information which had been told to her by. On April 22, 2008 at about 13:37 hours, I contacted and talked with, who said on June 20, 2007, Lee's girlfriend had called wanting to talk with her. She said his girlfriend had given her several stories of what happened on June 19, 2007. She said the first story she told her was that Lee had caught her and Leonard having sex. She said she questioned her about where she and Leonard were when they had been caught having sex. Lee's girlfriend told her they were in the bathroom. She said she told her Lee became angry. Lee was yelling and swearing at them and saying vile things that he would do to them. She said she told her Lee hit both her and Leonard. Leonard then left and Lee went after Leonard. She said the second story Lee's girlfriend gave her was Lee and Leonard were off someplace using mescaline. When Lee returned he jumped on her while she was sleeping and was swearing at her. She said she told her she didn't know her brother Lee was physically abusive. She said she spent a lot of time with her brother and he being abusive did not sound right to her. She said the third story Lee's girlfriend gave her was Lee had left and was helping move a woman named, and she called her a tall, blonde, beautiful, like her. She said the fourth story Lee's girlfriend gave her was Lee had driven up and caught her and Leonard kissing on the porch. On April 22, 2008 at 16:30 hours, I contacted, and she said at first she was not sharing all the information because she didn't know what to do or how much to share because she didn't want Lee's family to blame her for Lee's death. She was worried about Lee's family disowning her. She said, had originally told her Lee had come over and attacked her, accusing her of sleeping with Leonard. She said she thought it was within the first week, maybe 2 weeks of Lee's death, when had told her she and Leonard were caught by Lee in the act of having sex when Lee knocked on the bathroom door interrupting them. On April 23, 2008, at about 09:45 hours, Detective Viet Meir and I talked to Lee's girlfriend, who had earlier maintained she and Leonard were not engaged in any sexual activity on June 19, 2007, although they did have sex on June 7, 2007. She admitted she and Leonard were meeting around on June 19, 2007, and it was possible Lee had caught them by looking through the trailer windows from outside. She denied having sexual intercourse on June 19, 2007, but admitted she and Leonard at some point were at second base and may have been looking for a condom in the bathroom. She said she told Lee she was messing around with Leonard, and that they have had sex. She said she does not know if Lee took this as meaning right then, or if he was reacting to the knowledge that it had occurred earlier, on June 7, 2007. Leonard then became angry, and made threats against Lee and his family. He then left her trailer to go see Leonard.
Hopefully you're still here. Now, let's listen to the officer read us the probable cause affidavit for his arrest in 2022.
Without a warrant on December 7, 2022, and your affiant asks that a judge, after your affiant lays a complaint before him, determine whether there is probable cause to believe that said offense has been committed and that the defendant has committed it. The facts upon which affiant relied in believing there was probable cause for said arrest were: on December 6, 2022 at around 23:47 hours, I responded to a physical domestic dispute with Corporal Green and Officer Waters. As units were en route, dispatch advised an intoxicated husband punched his wife in the head and struck his daughter. The reporting person, later identified as, said that her husband, later identified as James Leonard, was actively cutting himself with a knife. Several more people called in regarding the same incident and said James was now hitting everyone. His wife told dispatch, James was following her around the house as she was on the phone. I arrived on scene with Corporal Green, and as I approached the house, she walked outside and was still on the phone with dispatch. I could see she had blood on her nose and mouth, and multiple areas of her head were covered in blood. She also had blood on her vest, and a large part of her left hand was covered in blood. I quickly asked her who else was in the house. She said her 3 kids and a grandchild were still inside the house, and James was in the east bedroom, still armed with a knife. Once she was safely away from the house, I went to the front door with Corporal Green. Based on the report of James acting violently while armed with a knife, and based on his wife being covered in blood, I drew my pistol and entered the house. I loudly identified myself as MPD and told James to come out of the bedroom with his hands up. After a short time, James walked out of the bedroom. I could see blood on his face and head, a long bloody cut on his left forearm, and blood on both hands. James followed my instructions, and I placed him in handcuffs, which were double-locked, and checked for proper fit. At no point during my contact did he complain of pain from the handcuffs. I frisked James for weapons and found 2 knives in his right pants pocket. I removed both of these and felt 2 more hard objects in his pocket. I removed a lighter and a commercially available packaged marijuana joint from his pocket. I walked James outside where Officer Waters advised him of his Miranda rights, and James said he understood. Officer Waters stood with James and I contacted his wife, who was clearly upset and very scared. I asked her to briefly tell me what happened and she explained the following. James was heavily intoxicated, having drank around half of a bottle of gin during the evening. He had been working on his truck in the driveway and she was in the living room on the phone with the internet company. James walked into the living room, saw her on the phone, and began accusing her of cheating on him. James slammed his phone on the ground and began screaming at children, 20 years old and 15 years old, were in the living room at this time. Boyfriend and her 1-year-old child were also in the living room. After yelling at his wife, James began yelling at others in the living room. After a period of time, James made a statement implying he was going to kill himself, and walked into the bedroom. His wife went into the bedroom to check on James, who had a history of cutting himself, and she found James actively cutting his wrist with his green automatic knife. She sat down next to James, who turned and struck her in the head with his closed fist. She later told Officer Waters that James' knife was in the closed fist when he struck her, which reinforced James had as he struck her. James then began to choke her from behind, wrapping his arm around her throat and applying pressure with a chokehold. She said she had difficulty breathing and, for a second, she could not breathe. Their daughter entered the room at this time, and she tried to hit James with a lamp to prevent him from strangling her mother. Her boyfriend entered the room while holding the baby, and pulled her out of the room. Her boyfriend took her and the baby to the neighbor's house where they remained for the rest of the incident. He later told me he saw James trying to choke his wife when he took his girlfriend out of the room. Around this time, MFD medics arrived on scene and treated James and for their injuries. I photographed his wife's injuries and, in addition to the blood on her face, I saw several swollen bumps on her forehead. I saw red marks across her neck which were consistent with being choked. I saw red marks on both sides of her face and chin which were consistent with being struck. I was unable to see the bite mark on hand, due to the blood. Officer Waters later interviewed both and gave me additional details about the altercation. After their daughter entered the room and hit James with the lamp, James's wife was able to free herself from James's chokehold. James pushed back on the bed, climbed on top of her, and continued striking her in the head with his fists. As was trying to fight James off, he bit her on the hand, drawing blood. He then pinned her down on the bed by pressing his forearm against her throat, and told Officer Waters she was barely able to breathe. Entered the bedroom, jumped on the bed, and tried to push James off while screaming for him to stop. James grabbed her and threw her against a dresser, and began striking her with his closed fists. I later spoke with and she told me James punched her with a closed fist in the face, head, and arms, around 12 times. James also kicked her and pulled her by the hair. She complained of severe pain all over her body, especially her left arm and side where she was thrown against the dresser. She was unable to recount how she got away from James, or how she made it to her room where Corporal Green found her hiding under a chair. She was very lethargic during my conversation with her, and during her conversation with Corporal Green. She appeared to be suffering from a concussion based on her headache, fatigue, impaired memory, and slow speech. Corporal Green photographed her injuries. Officer Waters told me that as James was beating, was able to get up and grab her phone. She called 911 and tried to separate. And James shoved her away and tried to grab again, but she ran out of the room. As his wife was on the phone with dispatch, James followed her through the house, holding the knife in his hand. James told her multiple times to hang up the phone but she refused. James said something to the effect of, "If you love me, you will hang up the phone," but she refused. Officer Waters asked her if she believed James was going to stab her with the knife. She told Officer Waters she had no idea what James was going to do. She said she was trying to listen to the dispatcher, locate her children, and keep an eye on James. She said while she was on the phone with dispatch, James made the large cut on his left arm with a knife and yelled that she cut him and he needed help. I photographed a trail of blood drops which lead from the east bedroom to the west side of the house. This was consistent with his wife's account of being followed by James with the knife. MFD medics transported both and for their injuries. Both of them signed medical release forms, and I will update my report when the full extent of their injuries becomes available. Medics treated James, but he refused to be transported to Gritman. I placed James in the back of my patrol car, and interviewed him. His eyes were bloodshot and watery, his speech was slurred, and I could smell the strong odor of an alcoholic beverage coming from his person. I asked James what happened and he told me that his gas tank on his truck fell on top of him, which is how he got the large cut on his arm. I pulled out the green automatic knife, which I took off his person, opened the knife, and showed him the blood on the tip. James said the blood was his but denied cutting himself. James also denied striking, saying that the only incident that occurred was arguing with. James told me he just went to bed as he could not handle them arguing. His answers to my questions did not make much sense and were very contradictory to the similar stories being told by all the other involved parties. James finally invoked his Miranda rights and I told James he was under arrest. James and his wife have been married for 5 years, and is the biological daughter of not James. Probable cause existed to charge James for IC 18918-2A domestic battery with traumatic injury in the presence of a child for striking his wife multiple times with a closed fist, and during one of the strikes, he held the knife in his closed fist. The 1-year-old baby was in the living room directly adjacent to the bedroom during the first part of the altercation, then was carried into the bedroom as he tried to get out of the room. Probable cause existed to charge James for IC 18905 aggravated assault for striking with a closed fist while holding the knife. Then after the fight, he followed her across the house still holding the knife. She did not know what James was going to do, but she retreated across the house as James followed her with the knife, having just been violently battered by him. Probable cause existed to charge James for IC 18913 attempted strangulation for putting her in a chokehold from behind so she struggled to breathe. Then after he pushed her onto the bed, he pressed his forearm into her throat so she again struggled to breathe. Probable cause existed to charge James for IC 181501 felony injury to child for slamming the 15-year-old into the dresser, striking her around a dozen times with his fists, pulling her by her hair, and kicking her. She was transported to the hospital for her injuries and complaints of pain. I transported James to LCSO jail where he was booked on the above charges. James's green knife was impounded as evidence. The marijuana found in James's pocket was impounded for destruction. Copies of the medical release documents were submitted to MPD records. I certify or declare under penalty of perjury pursuant to the laws of the state of Idaho that the foregoing is true and correct. Dated December 7, 2022 and signed by Nathaniel Rosendahl.
Now, an interesting little tidbit for you to consider. The officer who wrote the affidavit for James Leonard's arrest on December 7, 2022, that we just listened to, is Nathaniel Rosendahl. He also happens to be one of the two officers who were less than 250 feet from the King Road residence on November 13, 2022 from 2:50 a.m. until 3:32 a.m. I have done intermittent searches of the online MPD employee directory and haven't been able to locate Nathaniel Rosendahl so far in 2023. What happened to him? We know he was an officer during the time of the murders, as he was participating in an officer-initiated call for an alcohol offense during the time frame of the murders, directly in front of the house. And we know that he was an officer on December 7, 2022, as he is the author of the arrest affidavit for James Leonard. I only mention this because I have identified a connection across multiple incidents, and I'm keeping in mind that there's an unknown Brady Giglio issue with an officer involved in the investigation into the King Road homicides. Now for the moment you have all been waiting for. Hopefully you're still with us. But now that you have the backstory, here is the recording that we're all here to listen to. This is a conversation between James Leonard's wife on December 8, 2022. Her daughter joins in as well. After that, you'll hear him speaking to a male. You'll understand who this male is after you listen to her discuss their male neighbors.
The whole night was just a big mess. It shouldn't have ever happened.
Well, the problem is that I guess that it would all be laid out in a complaint that Fox News even put it up and just
yeah, and then
that was
it has
alleged.
nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And there's people on the internet trying to pin the murders and stuff on him. Yeah. It's like, there's nothing. My daughter, the one that was just out here,
Yeah.
she has bad depression, and this is my alibi, and this is what that Jonathan person wanted me to tell him. Do you have a card ready? I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit here and hopefully he's not him.
God.
But
I don't even know.
Yeah. It's just something. It was just a kind of like a freak accident. He's been depressed, but anyways, the night that all that happened,
Yeah.
that day before, my daughter was her ex-baby's, her baby's father, and all his friends was harassing her and telling her to kill herself. She's got depression, as it was, and they've known this. And I had her son, and she was supposed to be the designated driver for a friend's birthday party.
Right.
And instead, when they started sending that, I mean, she was getting messages after messages, so she decided she was going to try to drink herself to death. Then that didn't work. She realized that her and her boyfriend was coming here, and it was early morning, and she tried causing an accident, got the tire on her car popped. Who is that? Oh, it's you. I'm explaining to him the whole situation.
Which
Our alibi on this whole murder thing to make sure, that cleared.
did police ask you?
Yeah. No.
Oh no.
Because he had something happen a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
His DNA, his fingerprints,
2007
everything.
they put something on.
Yeah, they're throwing it back out. James Leonard, convicted murderer.
Right.
Come on now, leave that alone. He was young and stupid, and he'll be the first one to admit it.
That was 15 years ago.
He was depressed the other night. Drank a little more than what he should have on his antidepressants. and I think that's what triggered him, because he's never once touched me, never once touched my kids. Everything's great. He's a real great guy. He's got a big heart, and I mean, I could show you messages from all of our friends.
So is he out yet, or is he being held?
He's being held on a $100,000 bail.
Right, but the police said, "Hey, where were you the morning of?"
No,
the
that's
killing,
what this
or?
Jeremy or this Jonathan person, Johnny, is doing. He's blasting him and calling him a sex offender. I was like, he is not a sex offender. You better take that shit down. Yes, he is.
That's
You should
not
be
a real,
ashamed.
Jonathan can't be a real journalist.
Oh, I've seen his
He's from
videos.
Florida.
He's here in
But
town.
not with a legitimate agency. I don't see that.
I don't know.
The
I don't think
the
so.
thing that I read that brought me asking
What do
the
they call it?
question
JLR? JLR is what he
was,
goes
no
by.
clue who they are. I just know that Fox got the criminal complaint, put it up, and also put convicted murderer,
Yeah,
and what happened, and then you read down, it's like, oh, but not related.
That night,
Police
I tried to take my own life. The night before it all happened, I crashed my car. I totaled my car, and I was just trying to drink myself to death. And then the very next day, I was getting out of jail. We make Christmas, Thanksgiving dinners for the police station every single year.
Police station and the sheriff's department
Every
year.
single year, without question.
Yeah.
And I was going to apologize to them because I told them, you guys, if you arrest me, I'm not making you guys Christmas dinner or whatever.
Right.
I felt awkward for saying that. I was drunk. I was being an asshole. And as I was holding the door open for them, the FBI walks in town. And I'm like...
The FBI walked in?
Yeah, the FBI walked into the police station as we were walking out, trying to get information about my car. And I tried to kill myself again. And we were all home.
She was here literally just hours after she got out of jail, because we got her out about 6 p.m. And we came home, and she was still, really depressed and really still trying to find reasons to kill herself. And I was talking, I didn't trust it. I could not sleep that night. Me and my husband both were in here talking to her. She was laying in the living room, trying to talk her out, give her reasons why she's got to be here. That she's got a little boy.
My son is
And
almost a year old.
how would what it would do to our family? Just a whole bunch of things and stuff. And we were up till like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he went to bed for an hour and went to work.
Right. So then he
Everything
did
he
some
does,
drinking
he does for
earlier.
his family.
Yeah.
And then the other day, he was just drinking. He's been depressed. We've been trying to get him into an appointment, but his work schedule and stuff, every time they'd call for the doctor, doctor appointment on the phone, he was missing him because he was at work and he lost track of time.
Right.
So we weren't able to get him in his appointment, and that's the only way he could get his meds. And our doctor both, we got the same doctor, but they know that he's been depressed, and he even mentioned it the last appointment, not even about a month ago.
Right.
And he was just getting the meds back in the system because they weren't prescribing them to him because he couldn't make these appointments.
So bottom line is he'll get out pretty soon then.
We don't know. We don't know. He's being...
But he hasn't been questioned, like, where
the daughter
were
that
you
was
on
just
November
standing there,
13th?
she totally lied. She's an habitual liar, and I've got...
She just ran away. That's why.
She just ran away, and she just came back.
Okay.
This
Well, I'll be gone in a second.
No, I'm just saying.
But November 13th, that day, did police even ask him whether he was around?
I don't know if they've asked him since when they arrested him, because they kept him away
Yeah,
from
but
me.
before that, they had not.
No,
We thought it was our neighbors.
Who did it?
Yeah, we thought it was our neighbors.
Why?
Because they were cleaning their car with
early in the
bleach and
morning.
Clorox when it's 20-degree weather outside with
And then they
Clorox
disappeared.
and bleach.
They came back
And
with
bleach?
Yeah.
bleach, and
It
the
might
bleach
still
is still
be
on the
out there
porch.
What kind of car?
It was a red one.
It's a tiny little red car.
Not the white car.
No, that white car.
At what time were they cleaning?
It was about noon because James had just got home for lunch, and he was out there doing it. And cleaning inside the car. Bleach. I said, it's cold. He goes, it's bleach.
That's also what set him off. Is I remember he came inside. He said he was stuck underneath of the trunk, and the neighbor just threw a snowball at him. So he said the neighbor wouldn't throw a snowball at him.
Right.
There's people.
So when were you thinking, maybe that's who did it?
Well, when they left all that, they were there the day that, let's say she was in jail before the kids ever went to the bars and whatever they were doing. And they came home. I noticed that they were home early the next morning before I went to bed after talking with her. And we noticed that that car was back. and I was asleep, and then my husband came home from lunch, and he points that they were out there cleaning it, and they were there for a couple more hours, and that
This
car
would have
has
been
not
November
back.
14th, I guess.
It was like the Thursday,
Yeah.
because I remember the FBI came here and was asking me because I left a tip.
You left a tip about the neighbor?
Because like we're not sure. I'm not saying that it's happening, but they always have their blinds open. They're always staring at us.
Right.
Looking in our windows.
They're constantly always staring at us. And
Wait, so the FBI came because you called to say,
The tip line.
hey, it was the tip line.
yeah, and he said that they said
When
they were
when
gonna
did
be
you
around.
call? The day after?
A couple days later, because I was like,
So a couple days
don't know.
after the November 13th thing.
Oh, yeah,
You learned
yeah.
about it, and you thought, red car. You know what kind of car?
it's just a beater is all I know.
A beater.
Yeah, there's 2 red cars, and I thought the one red car that was back, because when they said,
A
when
red-
they came here, I was
red,
like, yeah, they came back. It wasn't
car
the
or
right red
truck?
car. They have a old beat up blue Ford.
Beat up old what?
A blue Ford. A beat up
Blue Ford.
yeah.
But the red car, you don't know what kind.
And they
So-
have 2 different ones.
So you called to say, hey, that there was a guy cleaning it up with bleach?
Yeah, with bleach, and he left the trash open or not open, but it was partially open. The lid wasn't shut all the way, and the paper towels and stuff was hanging out of it.
We called the tip line and they said that
And
they didn't
the
receive
bleach was
anything.
still sitting there. It's still sitting there. That
Yeah.
one car still has not been back.
The red car. It's
The
gone?
red car. There's
it was-
another red one over there, but that's not the one.
Okay, so there was a red car here, and it's now gone. Did it leave right that day?
It left the night they bleached it, which was about 4 days after it happened.
What time was it? Were they bleaching around noon?
Yeah.
The next day, and then that night it disappeared.
Yep. And we have not seen it since.
So the FBI came over to you,
Mhm.
and you told them this again, right?
Mhm.
And did they go over and question them?
The people weren't there, and he says, okay, he goes, I'm just going to let you know, we'll probably be back and forth around over here, just keeping an eye out on everything. And then I'm going to try to see if, when they're home, if we can introduce ourselves and find out the question.
Okay. So you don't know if it's an ongoing issue or not.
I'm not
Good
sure.
question.
Not sure.
That's crazy coincidence.
But, yeah, the whole bit where they're throwing his 2007 case up with what happened.
Yeah.
It's the mix that doesn't
And,
make
he
Did he
doesn't
beat
know.
you guys up?
He did me. And my other daughter decided she was going to jump in between me and him.
She said call the cops.
I told her, call the cops, call the cops. And,
My
they
father
all...
went up to the phone and she threw herself in the middle trying to
And
figure
she,
out.
cause she
Alright,
not
so
only did she
that's
throw
what it
herself into it, she threw herself swinging at him.
Yeah.
The light, she pulled my
Have
light
you,
out of the wall.
have you talked to him since or not?
They have no contact with him. And it really sucks because I know he's in bad shape. His mom even said.
Do you know the names of the folks next door?
Oh,
They-
I don't know nothing. They've been here for
Our
2-3
What
months.
number is it?
It's R40.
R40?
Our neighbor Lynn, she was living there for 14 years and she worked for Search and Rescue.
She still does.
She still works for Search and Rescue and they bought that
But,
trailer
but
out from underneath
she
her.
lives. Oh, so
She
she
did.
doesn't.
No, they booted her.
Bought her out
She
right
lived there for
underneath
many, many, many years.
Do you know how long those folks have lived here?
Probably about 3 months now.
3 months they've lived
In
in.
August.
Who is it? It's a guy, a girl?
It's
2 guys.
2 guys.
We've
How
only
old-
seen
how old?
one of the guys. Probably in the late 20s. He's tall.
Both in their late 20s, maybe. One guy's huge.
The youngest, I don't know if I could believe her, but
Which one was cleaning the thing with bleach?
I don't know. The big one, the night that I totaled my car, the big one came out and asked
it wasn't
if I
the big
needed
one.
help.
It was the smaller guy.
The smaller guy was here not too long ago.
Did you
Saw him
confront him and say, "What are you doing"?
No.
No.
So
With everything going on,
You called short while later. You called.
Mhm.
And again, the FBI came over next day, or
No, it took them over a week.
Huh?
It took them over a week. I called, in fact, the PD came over here for the Thanksgiving stuff, and I was like, hey, I said, I called the tip line on them, like over last week sometime, and I haven't heard anything. Have you guys? Yeah, we haven't gotten a call on it or anything. I was like, okay, maybe we'll do some investigating. I think it was like 2 days after that is whenever FBI came by.
All right. Do you know cops personally, or are you friends with?
Some, yeah,
Have you heard any tidbits about the case?
none.
No, sorry, it's called. You should get back inside.
It's okay. I'm fine.
I won't use your name. Obviously, you're a victim.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. He's blaring my name out there. It is.
What's your first name? Just so I have that listed.
Yeah, that's insane. They're not supposed to legally do that because.
No,
my
you see
pictures.
that listed, and when you put up his name and this address, that comes up.
Oh.
Your name.
No. That Jonathan Johnny Blues put my name, and he put a satellite thing with a map from here to the homicides. Yeah, look how close this is, and he's got our trailer circled on his map.
It's close enough. I was almost gonna move into those apartments.
Yeah, it's right up over past Arboretum and like 2 streets over. It's very close.
2-minute walk?
Oh no, it's probably like 10 minutes.
10-minute walk?
Yeah.
Jeez. Alright.
Yeah.
Sorry for what you're going through. Obviously, hanging in there and
But yeah,
things get better.
I'm not blaming him, because he don't remember anything. I know, most survivors,
Right.
they try to cover, but I'm not covering for him because he's never done anything.
Alright. Well, let me talk about it and see if we want to do anything with this, but I'm sorry for what
It's
you guys
okay,
are going
and I'm
through.
sorry it kind of
If
snapped
do
you.
you have my number?
On your card?
Can you text me your number at some point if you have?
Yeah, is it this 914 number?
Yeah.
Are you guys?
That's my
Are you
cell
from
phone.
New York?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
They flew me in for a week.
Oh boy. Yeah.
There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in this town.
Yeah.
My dad has nothing to do with it.
How old are you?
I just turned 20 in May.
You said there's a lot of crazy stuff in this town, but my dad had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, nothing to do with that stuff up there.
Yeah.
We keep to ourselves
We're home
all the time.
all the time.
We've got a set of friends, and that's because he's known him for years.
But police didn't even ask him questions about the November 3rd.
Not as far as I know. If they did, it would have been after they arrested him.
Okay.
Because, like I said, when they came here that night, I was coming out here on the porch. I didn't have my glasses because he knocked them off my face, and I was not going back in the front to find him.
Right.
And the cop was actually literally right there by my tire. And he had me come down there. Another cop pulled me all the way over there by her trailer,
Right.
and they went in the house. And I didn't see him. I didn't talk to him or anything with him before that.
And that red car is gone. It hasn't been back since?
That one red one has not been back.
Weird.
I know.
Were they going in the car to wipe it out, or did you see where
Inside, they were doing inside the car, on the seats and stuff.
Huh. And you don't know their name? But again, the number is what?
There's R4 on the front of their house.
There's no one there now?
I
Don't think so.
I don't know. There might be because
All right.
people.
All right.
Here, I'll
Thanks so much.
Please don't give my number out.
I won't. Hey, how you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
Good, thanks. I talked to you about something kind of weird for 2 seconds. It's cold. I don't want you to freeze or let out the heat from the outside.
What's up?
My name's Sean Cohn. I'm a reporter
Okay.
with the Daily Mail.
Okay.
And chasing everything related to this case.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that even one tip was called in about, a red car out here being cleaned with bleach.
What?
That got the FBI called in. Did you hear anything about that?
I've not heard about that.
That's so fucking weird. Maybe it's the one further.
On this road? Like in this trailer park?
Yeah, it's not you then. Have you heard anything about that case?
Not really.
Do you know any of the folks?
I didn't know any of them personally.
Yeah.
The closest thing, I think I know some people who might have known them. Like I know people who didn't come back after because they were going through a lot, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you're a student there? Or not?
Yeah, I'm a student. I'm a freshman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You haven't heard any buzz about the case?
Lately, not really. Everything's kind of not a lot of new information's come out lately.
Right.
Since the white Hyundai Elantra, that's the last car I heard about because Moscow police was posting on Facebook about they were looking for a white Hyundai Elantra.
Right.
So
Are you one of two guys? Is there like a big burly guy that you live with?
I have a pretty tall roommate.
Okay, so
I think he's already gone home. I think he's most of his fine.
does he drive another red car?
No, he drives a little blue car.
Little blue car.
I think it's like dark.
Were there two red cars here? Like,
not here. I think some other neighbors might have two red cars.
Alright, because the weird thing is that the claim was that one of the cars was being cleaned with bleach the morning after.
Oh wow.
Do you know anything about that?
No, at the morning after, I was in Lewiston with my girlfriend. So that's interesting.
Okay.
But the white Hyundai Elantra, I called the tip line and I told them like the U of I parking and transportation office.
Mm-hmm.
I told them like I don't know. It would make sense that would be a pretty obvious thing for them to do. But I told them like, if you haven't already, check the parking office because the parking office has every single car, make, model, year, and the student name associated with that at U of I. So I called the tip line and told them they should go off that.
That's smart.
Yeah.
But no other tips that you called in, right?
No, that's all I've known. I know as much as is on Facebook, pretty much.
So weird. Do you know your neighbor?
My neighbor? I don't know.
The one who lives there.
No, I don't know a single person in this part. I moved in here in September because it's cheaper than living on or by campus.
Right.
And I haven't met a single neighbor up here yet.
Huh.
I just kind of keep to myself here.
Okay. All right, cool. Any suggestions for me? Like any friend of someone who was in the house, or?
Not really. I don't really know
Okay.
anyone that would
All right.
get me closer.
All right. All right. Thanks. I appreciate
Have a
it.
good one.
You too.
3 enormous investigative errors that could impact the investigation and subsequent prosecution negatively are as follows. Number 1. Failing to identify and collect all the available evidence and information. Number 2. Failing to effectively analyze the evidence and information collected to identify suspects and form reasonable grounds to take action. And finally, number 3. Becoming too quickly focused on one or more suspect, or one or more theory of events, and ignoring evidence of other viable suspects or theories that should be considered. There is a record publicly available of Ann Taylor's success in pointing out these errors. One might say that no investigation is perfect, and perhaps that's true, but these errors affect the outcome of investigations. That outcome affects the prosecution of the case. And that outcome affects justice for the victims. Do you foresee any of these being an open wound to pour salt on? I can't help but recall how quickly individuals close to the victims were publicly cleared. How quickly people who last saw or interacted with the victims were cleared. How many individuals were never reached out to by investigators. It is terrifying to realize that people are arrested, as well as convicted, of crimes they did not commit. It's also terrifying to realize that dangerous people are freed because of mistakes that can be avoided, if you choose to make yourself aware of them. Many think a defense attorney exists simply to get bad people out of jail, and they couldn't be more incorrect. Defense attorneys represent advocacy, accountability, and protection of your constitutional rights. Nobody shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property, without due process of the law. They make sure the bar is met, because the consequences of not doing so can be severe. It shouldn't have to happen to you for you to care. And it shouldn't be a standard that you believe only applies to people you love, or people you think are innocent.